welcome to this first episode of Dialogues on Dharma with Dharmic Shakti. So a little bit about Dharmic Shakti. We are an organization that is trying to bring back the Shakti in our lives through Dharma. And the idea is to explore what Dharma means through conversations with many people, different people. So we will be looking at what Dharma means when in the context of management, leadership, building a sustainable future, as well as our day-to-day lives. So without much ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Rajshekar Krishnan to our first conversation. Dr. Rajshekar is a very accomplished coach, trainer, and facilitator. He has more than 3 decades of experience in organizational development and HR performance and enhancement. He specializes in leadership development and is basically the founder behind Wayda Consultants. Wayda is a firm that provides leadership and organizational development services to business and educational institutions. Dr. Rajshekar is a devoted seeker of spiritual wisdom, and he's a dedicated student of the Indian scriptures. He has been a follower of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharishi. But to me, Dr. Rajshekar is basically a great, fun conversationalist. He's like a powerhouse of energy. It's brimming with knowledge on Dharma. And I could not think of somebody who embodies Dharma and Shakti better. And so I'm really honored and really happy to have him be a part of this first conversation. So welcome, Dr. Rajshekar.
Thank you, Vanajaji, for your very kind words of introduction. 2 minor corrections. I have 40 years of experience.
Okay.
And
I try to make you a little younger,
No. I'm perfectly, fine with my age. I think I carry it on my shoulders like this Angavastram. And secondly, the name of my organization is Wayda Consultants, though I have spelled it as Wayda. That's a modern spin to Vada, which is Veda. So it's not, but of course, those who say Vaida, I also put it into Hindi and say we have a promise to deliver. So hopefully we'll have a
So
fruitful
it's
conversation.
a Veda, which is a Vada.
Veda.
No, when you said Vaida, which is a promise, it's also Vada.
Absolutely.
Very
So
nice.
in multiple ways of pronunciation or mispronunciation, whichever way you take it, it is hitting the nail on the head. So I'm so happy to be here on your show, and I look forward to our dialogue and conversation on Dharma and, of course, the Dharmic Shakti, which is the manifestation of Dharma in our lives.
That's correct. So thank you very much for being here today. Just wanted to ask you to give a little bit of brief about yourself. I did try to do that, but as you can see, I got it wrong. So it'll be nice if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and specifically how you began your journey in the space of understanding our Indic, wisdom and Indic traditions.
So I'm happy to do that. So I'll try to condense, many years of experience as quickly as I can. Professionally a mechanical engineer, spent 10 years in engineering. And thereafter, I have been for the past 3 decades in the space of leadership development and learning and development formally when it comes to one's jivika, as they say in Hindi, how do you earn your bread? The IKS or the Indian knowledge system or the dharmic part of it has come from my family in the sense that my grandfather was very religious and we had a lot of religious functions every Sunday. I used to go to his house. We were a few kilometers away, and I particularly remember the Surya Namaskars, which I did as a young child. You have the Aruna Prashna from the Taittiriya Aranyaka, which is, chanted, and 133 Surya Namaskars are performed. And of course, my grandfather also had a lot of spiritual books, and he particularly was also a follower of Ramana Maharshi, but I never understood who the sage was, whose picture was found to be there in almost every other room. And I would say that the leanings were from my family background, where I've been hearing Vedic chants, and also arose from the fact that my grandfather literally took me to every, Gita Jnana Yajna that Swami Chinmayananda, used to perform in Delhi, where we were when I was a child. And the seeds were then laid down. Then, of course, one gets into profession, and the seeds of the Bhagavad Gita, which I've heard from the very early days, was from Dayananda Saraswati also, when he was a part of the Chinmaya mission many, many years ago. So I've had the benefit, and thereafter I have been associated on and off with various religious ashrams. And I have always, since I have never formally entered an ashram or have been in the profession, and therefore there was a need always to understand what I was reading, about what the great men said in these ashrams and what my life as a professional was. So that is how the knowledge base and the practice base were there. And the need to merge the two was to avoid schizophrenia. So that I could be at peace with what I was hearing on this side and what I was hearing on the other side. So that's the basis of actually this whole curiosity about putting into practice what apparently was being preached.
Yes, and we need to get into that schizophrenia piece a little later because I can totally relate to that. uh, so so you had this wonderful background, very nice spiritual traditional background, right? Grounded in our Sanatan wisdom. And how did you make that move from engineering to, the coaching and mentoring which you're doing? How did that happen?
Well, actually, I would say that it was more by serendipity than by design. I didn't design my career move,
You
but
know what they say, right? Serendipity is God's design. So,
absolutely. So I may relate a little incident in the sense that um, being in engineering, you are inward looking, you are dealing with only your technology or whatever equipment that you're responsible for. You have no need actually to interact too much with the outside world other than the vendors who got the spare parts for the equipment that you're maintaining. So it was a kind of cloistered existence. And it also, of course, if you're a great technologist and engineer, your life is there. But then you realize that there is life beyond machines, there is life beyond the people behind the machines are more important, which is what I realized when I was responsible for maintenance and when I was responsible also for production, which is a well-set machine can be upset by a bad operator, and a good operator could handle a limping machine and get the production out. So the person behind the machine became the focal point of my interest, and therefore I moved into learning and development, which is diametrically opposite to engineering because you are always having a audience, participant group in front of you for whatever training program you're conducting. So I have been in learning and development since the year 1993. I passed out in 1983. 83 to 93 is broadly my engineering phase, mechanical engineering. And thereafter, since 1993 all the way to 2024, I have been in, of course, climbing the rungs of the ladder of learning and development. You begin with some very basic stuff, which is business etiquette and business communication and presentation skills and team building. And slowly the audience profile becomes more senior because obviously a senior audience is not going to listen to a junior facilitator. So as you become better in your facilitation and you also mature and you also happen to be a leader in your own function. So you see, I have been the leader of the learning and development function and the leadership development function in a very, very prominent multinational. And I had 70 facilitators reporting to me, and there were various verticals. So I could teach leadership because I was leading a team and therefore knew the ins and outs of the difficulties and the challenges that a leader faces. So it is not that I'm, rendering a theoretical exposition on leadership without having been in the hot seat myself, which is very important because
yes,
all of management is a combination of theory and practice, and it all goes back to my theory on one side and practice on the other side, which had to be merged together. So that's how my career I could kind of characterize in a few words.
so, when it comes to leadership, when did you really start figuring out that your leadership style was grounded in the Sanatan wisdom? When did that actually happen as
Yeah.
consciously? Because, leadership, most of us, when we move from the individual contributor to the management, stage, we are trained on what a leader should be. And, it's typically based on the Western model, where the leader needs to be authoritative, the leader needs to, lead, and the leader needs to talk, and sometimes a little aggression is good. So what was your leadership style? And, was it always grounded in our traditions and in our, our culture, or was there a point where you just, you know,
So I spoke about schizophrenia. So let me explain the professional schizophrenia.
yes, yes,
So being a
yes.
part of a multinational, much of what we did was based on, Western
Yeah,
theories and Western practice and
yeah,
Western validation of the theories, mostly an audience based on the West.
yes.
And since we were the Indian arm of
Mm.
the central office based in the US, we had to deliver what the Central Learning Development Team developed. So that was on one hand, and that was
So you were
mandated.
training people on Western style of
Yes,
management.
absolutely. You
Okay.
name the Western theory, I've done it. I've done it. So I don't want
Okay.
to name them here. But you
Which is
see,
your least favorite theory?
his favorite theory is all those Vroom's theory and so
Mm.
on and so forth. So you
Okay.
had those theories which are based on a limited sampling of a population which was absolutely Abrahamic
Yeah.
and made no sense in India, because in India we're all relationship based,
Yes.
and no matter how negative may be the characterization of the leader follower relationship by the terms and references of the Western leadership model, in India if you simply go up to a follower and say, hey boss, I need your help, I am dependent on you, and my boss will catch hold of me if you don't do your job, that simple linking up of your vulnerability with his strength makes the link. So a
Yeah.
leader, of course, it's always said you should not be the superhero leader, but you should be the vulnerable leader. Not all the time, but in times of crisis, we are all vulnerable. And the
Correct.
more human you are, the better leader you are, because you have to draw upon the human capacities of your team. And if there is too much of a distance between the leader and the follower in terms of capability or in terms of non-linkability, then the follower does not really get inspired because he feels you're too far away. It is like you getting inspiration from the managing director. It would not happen, but you would always want to get inspiration from your immediate team leader.
Correct. Yeah.
So therefore, there should be no gap between the team leader and the follower, or the subordinate, or the team member. These are various terms used, but that's possible only when the team leader is integrated himself or herself. And that is where I realize that much of what the West teaches is only descriptive.
Yeah.
It describes the behavior. You have wonderful psychometric tools which are so precise, so accurately, mutually exclusive, completely exhausted, MECE, and all that stuff that we have read about. But every time I go to a different program or a different HR head, there are different set of psychometric tools that get to be the
Mm.
fads of
Correct.
the year or the season or the particular business leader. And
Yes.
therefore, the same individual is being described by multiple different ways, multiple semantically different terms. But then the person is the same, and therefore there's a lot of confusion, because unless you are an expert in understanding how tools are created, you would actually be worried about being described in one fashion by one psychometric tool and described in a different fashion, though it might be the same from the perspective of psychology, but you cannot expect a leader or a potential leader to understand these technicalities. He's simply being described differently, whereas he is the same.
Correct.
So that is on one hand, which is the very hollowness of the developmental process. I
Mm.
can describe you, but I cannot change you. I cannot transform you.
I think that's precisely it, right? There's so much focus on how to label you, but there's very little focus on how to really, adapt and how to transform yourself, right?
And that's
So,
where, see, I've been a seeker, as I'd said
yeah.
earlier on. And at my grandfather's place, there was the, grand old Bhagavad Gita by S. Radhakrishnan, which used to
Mm.
be the staple book in the 50s, because that was the only Bhagavad Gita translation available in English. So I used to ponder over that and
Mm.
be taken to Swami Chinmayananda's lectures and Swami Dayanand Saraswati's lectures.
Mm.
Um, Even though I was belting out all this for the sake of dana pani, as they say, roti kabra. Yet, heart of hearts was always someone, personally, I believed in transforming myself through the philosophy, through the practices, through the Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Raja Yoga, all the 18 yogas that are there in the Bhagavad Gita. And I found myself more and more in conflict between my job and my understanding of leadership as emerged from the Bhagavad Gita, thereafter the Upanishads, and then you can trace back all the ideas to the Vedas and the entire IKS, panorama that you have. And that is when the conflicts became of execution, the conflicts became that of policy, the conflicts became that of certification. I used to, there used to be a demand for being certified. I refuse to be certified. Yeah, you judge me as I am. You judge my wisdom as I am. If you find myself incapable of dealing with someone, because usually learning and development is junior in terms of rank, and the people you handle are senior. But you look at the seniority of the person. Don't have to look at the seniority or the, I mean, as they say in the US, you're punching above your pay scale. I have always punched above my pay scale because if you look at the pay scale of the business leader whom I had coached and my pay scale, I mean, that was not the driving. But this is the language that is used. So, or in the US, they will say, if you ask anybody something, that's above my pay scale, and they will refuse to do the job. Whereas I always did the job only when it was above pay scale. Right?
Yes.
So that was the
If not,
kind of
what's the
challenge
fun?
that was
Right.
thrown to me. So therefore, to come back to the basic point you made, it is my stronger and stronger leaning into the Bhagavad Gita in moments of crisis, in moments of uncertainty, in my own journey as a leader, that led me to the very clear understanding that this is the future of leadership. This is the future of transformational leadership, though there is a theory of transformational leadership, which is pretty good. So, I mean, that's the one theory that I totally subscribe to. You have transformational leader, transactional leader, and passive avoidant leader, which is like sattva, rajas, and tamas that we have. It's pretty matching in terms of its terminology. But otherwise, I found most of the theories and the way it was taught, you see, if you get certified, it simply means you've been through the paces of what is to be taught. It doesn't mean that you can teach. And that's what I found, So everybody will ask you whether you're certified, but nobody will ask you whether you can teach, which I found absolutely amusing. So that's where the split happened. And I realized that, look, it's all a question, as they say in philosophy, as being and becoming. Everything in Western is about becoming, but in India, it's all about being. And when you from a state of being as a leader, as a teacher, you obviously have more impact.
Correct. I think the whole concept of swabhava, right? So that brings me to, because most of our audience would probably be new, or at least through this conversation, we are trying to create awareness about what Bharatiya management is all about. I would like to just slightly change tracks here and ask you to maybe just give our audience an understanding on what is Bharatiya management all about, and your take on why it is very relevant today, especially for us, living in India.
Okay, so if you read the books from the West, management was invented by Peter F. Drucker in 1954 when he published the book Management, Tasks and Responsibilities. The magnum opus, which is a wonderful book. But obviously, management does exist, and even in the West, management has always existed, as Peter Drucker himself has referred to the army as the first organization that needed to be organized and managed. And therefore, the army is the first source of all leadership and management principles. So if you look at India, India is a 5,000-year-old civilization, and therefore it could not have survived for 5,000 and of course 5,000 plus years. I'm just giving what's the bare minimum.
Yeah, this number keeps changing depending on which side of the patriotism you are in.
I'll say, Vande Mataram, I'll go 10,000 years. I say Jai Bharat Mata Ki, I'll go 15,000 years. Okay.
Correct. But,
if I see all the three together, I'll go back 20,000 years. So,
but I think 5,000 is I think
5,000
the
is good enough
number more or less,
audience to
yeah,
begin with,
you
to say
agree.
that if you have 5,000 years of continuing civilization,
Yeah,
because what you see in a temple today is a continued tradition. So it's not that ours is a
absolutely.
dead civilization, it's very much live in what we do, in the dress that I wear. This is Angavastram, has been worn by uh,
Absolutely. Right.
folks for generations. Therefore, when we try to understand how was the civilization managed, so
Hmm.
obviously, we did not have a Peter F. Drucker who wrote a separate treatise because we are a story-based, storytelling, narrative-based civilization. We knew that if you simply put principles and axioms like you have in geometry, which is what you have in Euclid and the other Greek mathematicians, whereas we have
Exactly.
Leelavati, where it's, my dear young girl, if there are two little mounds of rice and of wheat, which is going to be higher, and that is all about density and so on and so forth. So we are all application-oriented, storytelling based. So the management that we see called Bharatiya management is found in the Ramayana, in the Mahabharata,
Right.
in the Niti Shastras, in the very famous stories, Panchatantra and Hitopadesha, which are
Right.
not only the stories, but the maxims and the aphorisms, the Subhashitas embedded in them. They are found in specialized texts like Arthashastra, like Manusmriti, Dharma Shastra. There are many, many Dharma Shastras that are there. And of course, Dharma Shastras deal with the entire gamut of life, but particularly when we talk about management and leadership. Of course, in other languages, you have the Tirukkural, which is a magnificent. There's a full section on Artha, which is how the king should run his kingdom, how he should choose his ministers, how he should choose his projects, how he should be focused. All the things that we talk about in current times is very clearly mentioned there. So you have certain texts which have been identified for Rajaniti, Rajadharma. So it was not management. It was, I mean, it percolated down. Obviously, you had the, Varnashrama Dharma, where you had the Brahmanas, you had the Kshatriyas, you had the Vaishyas, you had the Shudras. So obviously, there was a way in which work was managed. And what is recorded is usually Rajadharma, which is how the Kshatriyas were managing their kingdom. But
Right.
the principles of leadership are very much the same. And they all percolated down or percolated through society in terms of how each one of the Varnas organized the work that they had, which was given to them. So organization of work, ensuring there's a productive output, and we can testify to the success of the system because first and foremost,
Stood
if
the test of
studies
time.
the economic history of India, just one
Yeah,
point,
yeah, yeah.
in zero, the year of the Lord, as we say, we
Hmm.
had 35% of the world,
GDP. Yeah.
economic trade share.
Correct.
And it declined only by around 10% all the way till the 17th or 18th century, when the educational system that brought about this percolation leadership, because our leadership is based on linking yourself with the Supreme. If you
Hmm.
link yourself to the Supreme, then the Supreme guides you in what your own profession is. And that has been the basis of all our leadership. Very simple, actually. Get a connection, get a hotline to the boss up there, and you're done. That's leadership in put in simple words. Yes, ma'am. Go
So
ahead.
there are two, three things which I wanted to kind of pick on, which you talked about. One is obviously the last point which you made about connecting with the divine and the divine giving direction as to how you need to go, right? And I do believe that this is the basic nature of Indians, and which has helped us actually manage chaos and uncertainty very easily. In fact, they call it the jugad, right? What is jugad? It's basically thinking on your feet, reacting to the environment, responding to the environment, and having that knowledge that there is always a solution, right? Because and this is in direct contrast to the Western model of risk management, right? Where you have these huge Excel sheets and you're constantly trying to manage risks, preempt risks, and in the process create new risks actually. So I feel this is like a very this is a fundamental difference between the Indic thought process, the Bharatiya thought process, and the Western thought process when it comes to management. The second thing which you mentioned, which is the origins of management, where the origins of management, as you said, for the West, it was around mobilization of resources for going to war. So its basic DNA is in conflict, right? I will win the war if I have more of the goods than you, right? However, us, if you look at it, one is, you mentioned the Varnashrama system is about peaceful coexistence between the society, right? And also, I read somewhere that, the yagyas that used to happen were at such large scale, multi-day yagyas, so many different kind of ahutis and animals and people and, food and, the kind of organization scale that is required to conduct some of those yagyas were phenomenal. And a lot of the management techniques actually evolved from there, because even there you needed just in time, you need to know right when the swaha happens, you have to, that is the ahuti that needs to be done. And you had actually entire teams, even the Vedic pundits were put. There was one guy orchestrating the whole thing. So, that itself is a sign. So, I found that very interesting. So, given this whole theme of conflict and risk that the Western model has innate to them, if you can just elaborate a bit on how you feel, because that's the unlearning that needs to be done, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So what we need to realize, there's a Doha of Kabir, I think, which I can't recall, but I will give the English translation. And of course, I have a few smattering of the words, So we are like, chana.
Mm.
Chana is, I don't know how you put that in English. So we are all like
Gram. They call
gram,
gram.
Bengal gram. I think so. Uh, on the lap of Yama. And Yama is just picking scoopfuls and he's putting it into his mouth. And then some of them fall back, some of them
Get
are
swallowed.
swallowed, some of them are stuck between the teeth, some of them are ground. So
Lovely.
it is, we are like, we are like the gram which will be consumed by Yama at any moment. Therefore, what can you really say about your future? You can't say anything.
Yeah.
So you see, there's a fundamental acceptance that you are not an eternal being, because that's the very first statement made by Lord Krishna when he gives his great bit of advice. Ashocyan anna shochasam pragyavadan sabhasya gatasoon agatasoonscha. So there are only two varieties of people. Those who are gone, those who are not yet gone. So if I am alive, I am not yet gone. Okay. So that is the fundamental risk that you always have. So when you accept that you are a gatasoonscha, na anushochanti pandita. So we are the pandits who know that, look, I may step out of the house and something may happen. Therefore, life itself is a risk and life has to be lived in the moment. Life has to be lived fully, because I don't know whether I'm there in the next moment. So when I accept that fundamental risk factor of life, everything else is very, very insignificant in comparison. Because that is when, see, when you live in the moment, you are fully functional. You are neither in the past regretting what you have done, nor you are in the future worrying about what's going to happen. Because at the end of the day, all the planning that we have and all the case studies that we read. So case studies about the past and planning is for the future. So both of them are obliterated. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, because it's mental training. So ultimately, your ability to create what's called plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D is dependent upon your having learned from the experience. And, pratyaksham, anumanam, upamanam, agama. Agama, in one sense, is the case studies that we have. We have learned from the past. So we have to learn from the past so that we don't repeat.
Apta vakyam is what they say.
Aptavakyam. Correct. Absolutely. Thank you so much for
Expert.
filling in the absolutely accurate word. So we must do that, but then we have to realize that they are not going to happen the way we read about them. It is only culturing our mind to the fact that something untoward can happen and we better be prepared for it. And it is this that makes Indians the best crisis managers, Indians the best jugadus, as they say. Indians are the greatest loophole guys also. They'll find a loophole somewhere because they got to survive. So if you want to find a loophole in any system, give it to an Indian. Of course, if the fellow is devious, he may land up in jail. But then if he is law-abiding and yet can find a loophole, he'll be a brilliant lawyer. That's what lawyers do.
And that's where Dharma guides, right?
Exactly. That's the point.
So, the fact is that we are able to respond to the situation. And we also given a set of principles that will not allow us to go very,
Kind
stray,
of,
right?
it is the guardrails, as they
Correct.
say.
And
Dharma is the guardrails of action.
correct. And that whole concept about, that parasparam bhavayantaha, which they say, mutually interdependent on each other. So,
Absolutely.
what would be good is if you could share, like in your, because now you do leadership coaching based on, the knowledge that is there in our, itihasas, Puranas, and the whole Vedic literature. So, what would be some of the core tenets which you use when you are coaching people, and how, if you can just share some light, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I will.
Mm.
So you see, let's say that you're deeply grounded in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and and that's the only certification you have. What's your certification, sir? I've read the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. So how are you going to go about
And
coaching?
that used to be a certification in the olden days. I
Yes,
mean,
it was. It was. It was. You are a wise person.
yes.
You have read the 100,000 or it's around 90,000 shlokas of the
Today,
Mahabharata.
unfortunately, reading the Mahabharata means I've read the Amarchita Katha version of it.
That's terrible. It's terrible.
Oh, I've seen the TV serial.
Yes, I've seen the TV serial. So, how do you go about doing it? So, I would say that, y- the way I have experienced it is twofold. Number one, you are grounded. The coach has to be grounded. The coach cannot be swayed by the circumstances. So, the greater the grounding of the coach, the greater, and you have to allow the wisdom of the Supreme to manifest through you. This is
That's
how it is. This is how it is. You say, Sahana bhavatu, Sahanao bhunaktu, Sahaviryam karvavahi, Tejasvi namaditamastu, Ma vidvishavahe, Om Shanti. This is the prayer of a coach and a coachee. Of course, traditionally, student and teacher, but coach and coachee should also chant this together, saying that, hey, I have a problem. It could be a work problem, it could be a boss problem, it could be a politics problem, it could be anything. Correct. So I don't go with a preset process. You have goal, you have so many of these, steps that you need to take, and then you realize that if you're certified in the steps, you're actually groping to find out when should I move. Okay, because it becomes very silly because no race is run basis, step number one, step number two, step number. You got to go.
yeah.
So in the same way, no conversation is there with a predetermined transition from one step to the other. It is seamless. It's a nice word to use, but you see the seamlessness of your conversation and the transition to the next point, because you have to contribute significantly. You cannot be stuck as a coach in what the problem was as stated to you. You got to help move beyond that. So you got to find out the logic is where you got to find out the background, you got to find out what are the assumptions, so on and so forth. But for you, and you see, at least for me, we would be just talking and exchanging, talking. Suddenly, towards 3/4 of the hour, a brilliant idea will come to me. Which is the fix for that situation, which is the suggestion for the situation. So you have to trust the Supreme, and definitely, I've had a senior coach friend of mine, who is kind of agnostic to all our Indian tradition, but he tells me one thing. You know what, Rajshekar? I said, yes, boss. He says, the day I do pranayama and go, my training is my coaching is great, because obviously the left and right are synchronized better.
Correct. Yeah.
The day I don't do pranayama, I am like a dullard, and I am like, the guy who should not have been hired. So there is obviously the holism of the coach, which is important in this entire matter. And the more you are read into our Indian scriptures, the more of sadhana that you do yourself, it's very good, because that is what will help you intuitively realize what to do. And you should have read. See, for you to intuitively realize, it should be a big base, as is very traditional in the saying for training or anything else. Only 1/9 or 1/11 of the iceberg is seen. There is 10/11 or 9/11. I forget that ratio, which is below.
1:10.
Means that for speaking, if you speak 1 minute, you should have at least 10 minutes of reading.
True. I want to, the point that you talked about, getting the wisdom, right, channeling the wisdom of God, and also, that being translated into intuition and using that for problem solving. The challenge which I have seen is that I have been usually an intuitive problem solver, but what happens is that in, today's world, you need to go with data, right? So if intuitively, something is going to go wrong or there's going to be a problem here, unless you actually go powered with data, okay, or so-called what they call rational, intuition actually has no place in today's the whole management piece, right? I mean, if you have a PowerPoint and a graph which shows data in one way, so
See, all those are,
how do,
sorry.
yeah.
So you need to have this. Sorry, I've interrupted you because
No,
so
no,
easy
no,
to
absolutely.
answer your point, which is yes, you have to make a definite demonstration of rationality by having a PowerPoint or having so-called sequential steps showing the linearity of the thought so that people can understand what you're saying. But you see, connecting the dots is intuitive, incubating the idea is intuitive. So the actual solutioning happens only in an intuitive way.
Yeah.
The data can be picked up and can be rationally explained. And that is what people call rationality. When they see 5 steps in sequence in a PowerPoint, that's rationality for them. Whereas that is not necessarily rationality, because we put irrational data points which don't have a basis of their precise collection. It makes no sense. So yes, one has to deal with the mindset of the people. And I must share with you something here where sometimes, these kind of coaching efforts are not appreciated because coaching is not done in isolation. It's an organizational effort, and the organization's head, who may or may not be inclined towards Bharatiya management, may suddenly feel out of sorts because he himself does not know. If he's not read about Dharma, or he or she has not read about Mahabharata, and or has felt that these are all some ancient charlatan stories, and suddenly he comes to hear that this coach has been using this with his prime hypots, as they say,
Yeah.
then he's going to say, I don't want any corruption of mind with all this superstitious stuff, and he may in fact disengage.
Yeah.
The thing. So that brings us to the mindset of the industry, perhaps. Maybe you would want to
No,
put
and
the
this is
question in a better way.
precisely what, at Dharmic Shakti, this is really what we want to change, right? Because personally, my journey has been that I did not have a grounded, um, a grounding in Sanatan tradition in my childhood. Okay, I'm totally the stereotypical Western educated Indian. Okay, so, and I was that most of my life. So for me, going back to our roots was a process of total discovery, right? And it changed me in a way in which I could no longer reconcile with the old way in which I was living my life. So unfortunately, but then a lot of things made sense. So the more I was grounded in the understanding of the Gita and the Upanishads, and the more I started letting go, changing my leadership style, uh, ironically, the better I was doing at my job, the more success I was having, and the more disconnected I became. So I could not internally reconcile with what was happening, but externally it was manifesting into, things the organization was really happy about. And unfortunately, I could not actually come back and take all of this, the principles on which I was working. I know it would not be acceptable to them, right? And I do believe that mine is not a unique case. There are a lot like this, and somewhere we have to mainstream our Sanatan knowledge into management, into leadership, into various ways of life. And unfortunately, Sanatan equals religion. Okay, and even spirituality is an okay word, but religion is totally wrong word. Okay, and you're not supposed to use it at at a workplace.
Yeah,
And
it
of
is
course, belief in
like
God is
Harry
all,
Potter. He who must not be named,
he who must not be named. Absolutely right. So all of this is he who must not be named, and as a result, there's really a lot of applicable wisdom which we are not able to take to the table. And conversely, we are finding an import of these knowledge back to us, right?
Yes.
So you have a servant leadership, or some of these transformation models, or even strength, right?
Authentic leadership.
Authentic leadership strengths, right? And which we call swadharma, right? So all of that coming back to us, packaged, but with the context missing. And that is, I think, something that we do want to change by having people understand really, the Bharatiya management is really wisdom based management, right? And the model, there is a super model which fits into all aspects of life, not just management. It's
Absolutely.
ingrained into all parts of your life. So
Absolutely.
so for our audience, uh, because I know you do a lot of very detailed courses on Viduraniti and Bhagavad Gita and leadership on that. And so we will bring you back for one more, detailed conversation on it. But there will be a lot of people who do not have this understanding of what Bharati, management is all about. So if you can just, maybe bullet pointed or four, 5 things which they need to be aware as to why Bharatiya management is superior. And obviously, I speak with a very biased outlook, but I know it's right. Why is it, in what way is it better than what we have in, the Western-based management models?
So usually when we talk about Western-based management models, so it's as though there is a management behavior and there is a behavior of you as
Yeah.
you are, and the two don't meet.
Mm.
So when the two don't meet, there is a burnout, there is a
Yeah.
ethical lapse, there may be a posh, manifestation, because we are all a combination of the good, bad, and ugly. And unless we get rid of the good, bad, and ugly, I mean, get rid of the bad and ugly and enhance the good, we would not be wise managers or leaders. So the character is not emphasized in the West. It's as though the qualification and the knowing of management tenets makes you a manager, whereas character makes a manager, character makes a person. So there's no emphasis on character other than, of course, if you look at psychology, they say traits in your character, but that is more descriptive rather than an aid for transformation. So the basic difference between India Bharatiya management is Bharatiya management says, are you, first of all, transforming yourself?
Mm.
If you're not transforming yourself and you're simply doing your job, supposedly doing your job as a team leader, you will fail because you will not connect with people. You see, you are honest to yourself and you will be spontaneous in your responses and you will not be caricatured in your responses.
Right.
And people take to it. People will talk to you because they know that you're not putting on a show because you're a team leader. You are who you are.
Yeah.
So this ability to be who you are is your swadharma, swabhava, swakarma. There's an entire sequence of things, which
Yeah.
need to be understood, which is what. So it's self-discovery, it's authentication, it's self-realization, self-actualization, which doesn't mean that you are in some ivory tower and you don't know what's happening around you. It simply means that you're grounded. You know that, okay, I am so and so, these are my special capabilities. I can't do some 500 things. I'll get those 500 things done by my team members. Why should I be a jack of all trades when I cannot be? And why should I put up a show of strength? So the honesty to be who you are is what actually makes you a leader, because one of the definitions, and pretty good Western definition, is a leader gives meaning to people. But
Mm.
unless a leader has found meaning herself or himself, what meaning are you going to give to people? So the Indian tradition, Bharatiya management, first speaks about what meaning. Is it your Swadharma? Do you like to lead people? Do you like to guide them? Because at the end of the day, the manager is not the one. As they say, a manager has to produce better people. If you
Right.
produce better people, the job will automatically get done. You don't have to manage the job. So we got it all wrong. We think it's about task management. No, it's about people coaching. It's about making them grow. But you cannot do that if you're not going. If you are one shrunken, shriveled little fruit, then what kind of enthusiasm are you going to impart to others? So it's all beginning, swadharma, my management, self-management begins there. And it just travels. People, you see, there's a very famous story of this North Pole explorer named Shackleton, and I love
Mm.
the story. So he I mean, they were trying to conquer. This is 1911, 1912, when North Pole had not been conquered. So there were a lot of people who were
Explorers.
putting out those expeditions which needed funding, and they failed because the ships would get stuck in the ice, and that would be the end of that particular attempt to go to the North Pole. So Shackleton was one who was intrepid, and he used to always, every 3-4 years over a period of 20 years till he finally got to the North Pole. So it was one of those trips. So the thing is that if an expedition was announced saying Shackleton was a leader, men by the droves would come to apply, because he would say very clearly, I don't have money to give you.
Mm.
I don't have fancy pay. It's going to be hard work. Then someone asked, because it was like someone interviewed one of those Steve Doors, the guy who cleans the floor of the ship. Why did Shackleton gives him meaning? He loves my job. Okay. So that is a true leader. So it's not that good leaders are not found elsewhere,
Yeah.
but the principles of leadership are well articulated and laid out so that when you read the Bhagavad Gita, you get to the heart of the matter. Yeah, great leaders are there across civilizations, across cultures, across nationalities. So it's not that because Bharatiya management is there, only Bharatiyas are great, nayakas or leaders. You have leaders elsewhere who may have intuitively understood, or maybe to use the Indian theory, they were born as Indians in their previous birth. They've taken it across there.
I
That's
think
being very biased.
a very interesting point which you talked about right in the beginning is about character, right?
Correct.
And it's very strange, but character is absolutely given no importance, right? So whether you're hiring, you look for attitude, and I don't know what attitude is when it comes to character. For me, attitude is something that it's very transient, right? I can
I
have
can put on an attitude.
You
No, I
can
can
put on
put
an
on.
attitude,
Yes,
correct? And more importantly, skills.
correct.
So everything is about the skills and attitude. And ironically, even the growth of leaders in organizations becomes a combination of, you're rising based on your skills to your highest level of inefficiency, right? So we
We
don't
will
have
get a new
character-based.
acronym. Instead of saying ask, attitude, skills, and knowledge, we'll say CASK, character, attitude, skills, and knowledge. For
Absolutely.
contribution, in the
Absolutely, because character is what is consistent, right?
Absolutely.
And skills are, something that becomes redundant, and
Absolutely.
attitude is something that can be faked, right?
Absolutely.
So,
So
how
when
do we get
character powers these three, then you have a
correct?
authentic person.
Correct. In fact, character is what is. If you look at the difference between people who are successful and non-successful, it's really character. So how do we get this, shift in understanding to happen? Because it takes a while also to understand character, right? You cannot assess character with the current way recruitment happens. So, and also character building also is something that totally it is not focused upon, right? It in neither in schools nor even in homes these days. It's parents are really more focused on how much you get in maths, how much you get in science, not really what how did you help someone today, or what did you do that stood out from the rest. So, what is your take on this? And do we have a role over here?
Yeah. So there is, you see, in the appointment of ministers, in the appointment of public servants, there is a lot given about the recruitment tests in Arthashastra, as well as Ramayana and Mahabharata.
True.
It says very clearly, good family, good character. That's the first statement made. Now, of course, okay, now how was a minister judged for? So there are some 18 tests given. So one judge of character, I will say. So the potential minister was given, would be in a fake situation where apparently the queen would want to come with him.
Right.
He says
It's an
yes to that, he's
Arthashastra.
finished.
Yes, it's a test.
He's finished. Okay, which means that he's got no respect for the lady of the kingdom. Correct.
Correct.
Simply because, so it is what we call assessment and development centers, right? Assessment development centers are going to put you through a simulation of what you're going to face in the job, but unfortunately, they are only skill based and attitude based. They are not character based. So
True.
the fundamental change that we need to bring in everything that we do is we need to have temptation. So how is character checked? temptations, financial temptation, sexual temptation, positional temptation,
Our
taking your expenses temptation. I can do anything I want temptation because I'm the
yes,
boss. See,
yeah.
if you look at, in fact, I was reading a wonderful book, which is called, actually, no, it's in my, Kindle. I can't see it right in front of me. It is written
Mhm.
by a great Indian senior leader from the Tatas, R. Krishnan,
Mm.
where he has looked at the senior leaders who got fired from their jobs. And it's all, and at the end of all that, in the summary, he says, character, character, character. That is the conclusion that the great gentleman makes, and he's, of course, a senior director himself right now at a ripe, wise age of 75. And I hope he's hearing this. I thank you for your book, sir. It's really valuable. Though, of course, it's my bad, as they say in current language, that I can't recall the name of a book immediately. But yes, ultimately, he says that when directors have to be recruited onto the board, first is character. Then only comes the domain
Yeah.
knowledge and skill.
And that requires a mind shift across the board, right?
So it requires a person of character to judge a character. So if you don't have
True.
character, what kind of character are you going
The
to
whole point of Rajadharma, right?
correct? So the whole point is that, so I'm not saying that all recruiters are characterless, far from that, but I'm saying if you have more character, then you will recruit people. Birds of the same feather flock together. So you need to
True.
bring people of substance. So the modern terminology is, woman of substance, person of substance. Say straightforward character. People are afraid to say character because it is a very, very nebulous
Right,
word. And
right.
management is all supposed to be precise and exact. So this whole mathematical dependence that HR has is also HR's folly, I would say. Because
Hmm.
HR is not about HR metrics that we have. Of course, it is important in its own way, but it is to be driven by feel, by touch, and HR is shying away. And you have all these stalwarts of HR from the West who have been constantly drilling in the quantification of HR, which
True.
is its detriment, is what I would personally feel. I don't know whether you agree.
No, I agree. I think somewhere mathematics is a great language to describe the outer world, right? But I don't know whether that is the right language to describe the inner world and the world of emotions and the world of people and personalities, right? So unfortunately, we seem to be trying to use that language in everything.
Mm.
May not be it may not be right, and I do believe it's a limited understanding, right? Because the tendency again is in to externalize everything and to objectivize everything, whereas in the Bharatiya context, it's all about subjectivity, right? It's a
Correct.
subjective
See,
experience, and
numbers will come if the guy is or
correct.
the girl is turned on and is full of energy. Numbers don't matter.
Correct, correct. So, so I think we've it's a good hour and it's been wonderful, but I still have a couple of questions which I want to ask you.
Sure.
Uh, so and since this is the first podcast that we are doing or the dialogue, so I'm going to kind of put myself out here and ask you a very straightforward question. We do want to bring greater awareness of the concepts of dharma based management styles, right, which includes everything: management, leadership, and many more use cases. And we want to mainstream it and give it some kind of a its righteous place, because it's not like these concepts are not welcome, but they're coming in from other areas with a very different kind of a context. So what in your what is your advice to someone like me? What do you think will be some of the challenges that we face in getting people to acknowledge that probably this is the way forward, number one? And what would be your suggestions on how to handle those kind of challenges? So
So, so when I look back to the popularization of certain
mm,
Western,
mm,
Dale Carnegie, how to influence and influence people, how to
correct.
stop living, how to start living and
Ironically, he committed suicide, right? So the guy
yes,
who wrote all these books.
yes, sadly.
Mm,
Okay. So you would see that there is a branding, there is a marketing, there is a book, there are courses, there are, multiple trickle down
The whole
products.
ecosystem, yeah.
Yeah. So that is something, or if you take, let us say, an idea in management, let us say,
Mhm.
emotional intelligence. Our
Correct.
great man, David, what's a Godman? No, Goldman.
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 Mm.
Goldman. David Godman is the key person for Ramana Maharshi. So long time since I read Goldman.
Is it
Apologies to you,
Daniel
sir.
Goldman or David Goldman?
Daniel Goldman, sorry.
Yeah.
I am now, since I have got into Ravana, one of the
I think I have the
greatest.
book somewhere behind.
Yeah, that's okay. So you see, he of course put together the idea
Mm.
and presented the seminal book,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
from there, an whole industry has erupted. People certified, people. So we don't have, we have to learn that from the West.
Yeah.
The idea may not be great, but it is a popular idea, and
Mm.
once there is a popular and academic acceptance of an idea, there is an ecosystem of people. For example, I'm a member of the International Leadership Association, which is
Mhm.
based in the US. Okay. Now, people whom you've not heard of are all members of that. They are all members of the faculty in various smaller universities that you find in America. And
Mm.
they're all professors of the Leadership Academy there. And each one of them will be giving a small twist to the leadership theory, contextualizing it and presenting it. So
Yeah.
therefore, an ecosystem of knowledge. But you see, they also have an axe to grind, which is ultimately it is what we have learned from Sri Raji Malhotra, U-turn theory. It goes to India, goes to America, comes back to us. So they have an axe to
And
grind.
we pay high royalties to
Yeah, yeah.
access it.
So we also have an axe to grind. I think, we will do some reverse, transportation to the US and make some monetize it. You see, we Indians are very shy of monetizing because in our tradition, what
Correct.
happens is even the name of the great sculptor is not mentioned, who would
Correct.
have created something beyond Michelangelo or some of the greatest sculptors whose names are bandied about day in, day out. Right? We are all very humble people because we know that it's not me, the individual with this body and hands, but the divine is operating through me. But
Absolutely.
then, do in Rome as Romans do, and to survive in the Kali Yuga, we will have to go full hog and give them a taste of their own medicine, is what I feel. I'm very aggressive about this. So I don't think so. If you have this, you should write one book on Dharma, Dharmic Shakti, write one book. It may be, I used to always feel, what new thing can we say? Everything is already said in our scriptures, but we have to get over that because these blokes in the West, especially the Indologists, whom I will not name, but who are at the heart of all this misrepresentation of India, what do but belt out the same thing that is already there and just give a spin here, a spin there, and that will incorrect spin. At least hopefully we will give the correct spin when we are anchored because our culture that you speak about. So I think to answer your question, we need to create a lot of downstream products. We are the knowledgeable guys at a Sanskrit level.
Correct.
नहीं, संस्कृत से डाउनस्ट्रीम करना है मैडम सॉरी टू ब्रेक इनटू हिंदी so you need instructional designers, you need trainers, you need certification. Viduraniti certified trainer, that chap can handle 8 chapters of Viduraniti, knows all the things up and down, knows how to deal with this shloka. That's what I want to do because I have done Viduraniti. I'm in fact writing a book, but what I hope to do is to do exactly what I have seen happening to 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. There are some 10 spin-off books, Principle Centered Leadership, 7 Habits of Effective Teenagers, you name it. And I mean, give it to them. I've got, if you can't do it, why should you be jealous of what they are doing?
No, I think that's perfect. It's wonderful. Like, I think Dr. Radhakrishnan Pillai, right? He's done it very successfully with the whole Chanakya, series. And
So
he
we may
teaches
look down. Some
also,
people do
right?
look down upon him, but they're incorrect. This is the way to
Correct.
do it.
And he teaches the original sutra. So he's not like, I mean, he has actually gone out and
Exactly.
taught people what are the basics, 6,000 sutras that are there in the Arthashastra and Chanakya Niti.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a very valid point, sir. And maybe, this is my humble opinion. At some level, we need to come together, right? Because there are so many versions of the Bhagavad Gita based management. Everybody does their own piece. But nowhere do we actually come back and say, okay, let's my version, your version, and his version, let's all align it. And let's
Listen,
create a small, little a think
listen.
tank. right? On the
Yes,
Bhagavad Gita. Hmm.
yes and no, because you see, that is the beauty of the universality of the Gita, where it is that's a strength and a weakness. For
Yeah.
example, there is a Marxist Sanskrit scholar named D.D. Kosambi. You may have heard of him.
Mhm.
He says that this very flexibility of the Gita means that it means nothing because it has to mean one thing. Okay, so that's one extreme.
Yeah.
And then there are other people, Swami Satyananda Saraswati, he's a WASP, white Anglo-Saxon
Okay.
Protestant who's into the Hindu fold, and he's a part of an ashram which is, aligned to, Devi.
Mhm.
And he has a wonderful interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita where he says everybody who reads the Gita should write their commentary because it means
Yes,
something for him or her.
that's
So
true.
you have two extremes of thought where you are highly doctrinal, you have dialectical materialism saying that this is the way things happen,
Correct.
and then you have the fluidity. So I would say that yes, you are right. A newcomer will be perplexed by the multiplicity, but then I think that is the beauty. And
Correct.
therefore, you have to, the advice that I give people, people ask me, which is the version of Bhagavad Gita that I do, which is the best version? I said, there's no best version.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a version which will fit your current needs. So I'll have a conversation. And since I have many of the commentaries myself, which I've read, I'll prescribe one particular commentary to start with. I say, you read this first, then I'll prescribe some other commentary, which may say something which may be
Correct.
complementary, even diametrically stating the fact in a different way. But that is the learning that you get from the Gita, that the more you read the Gita, the more you understand how it caters to humanity, because humanity is not one character, humanity is multiple characters.
True.
There's a challenge in what you say. It's not like Western science where you have, one explanation probably.
Yeah.
So we have to deal with that, and it's a challenge. I agree. It's a challenge for us to understand because you cannot say that there are, 10 versions of the Gita. These are the authorized versions of the Gita. There's nothing called
Yes.
authorized version because
I mean, there's no authorized version of Sanatan Dharma itself, right?
absolutely.
Every
Because
matha is
yeah,
fine.
yeah,
Even
yeah. But
even
then
our philosophy, you have,
but
six
it
plus
is a
three
pedagogic
darshanas.
problem.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is a pedagogic problem. It's an andragogic problem. You've highlighted it very accurately. And there are no answers, but I think we need to have more people familiar with the Gita in the first place so
Yeah.
that they raise the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my feeling in this matter.
No, very, very nice thoughts actually. And it was wonderful, very nice conversation. I've had a lot of fun. And I think there are a lot of takeaways personally for me as well as for others listening in. One is, and I'll probably try to summarize some of it. I do think some of the things you said will make its way into, what we call laghu videos, tiny, tiny videos. And hopefully, act as food for thought for others. But thank you so much, Dr. Rajshekar, and for giving me this time and also talking about your experience. I would really like you to be back and maybe take one of those topics which you talked about, either the Gita or the Vidura Niti, and explain it a little bit more. Obviously, it will not be the same as your full course, but just give a teaser, right, to people on what is inside, what are the seeds inside some of these texts. So I look forward
Yeah.
to that conversation too soon.
So I would only end by saying your word is my command. Call me anytime.
Yes, thank you.
So thank you so much, Manaja ji. I really enjoyed the conversation. It kind of flowed, and I do hope that I was able to, convey my ideas, and also hopefully your audience would find, value in what I've said. I don't know. They are the judges of this
Definitely.
conversation. But personally, I enjoyed it, and I did not even have a notion of passage of time.
So did I. So did I. Thank you
But
so much, sir. And thank you for all of those who are watching this video. Namaste.